Do you want to hear a heartwarming story about a woman who walked a 1,000-year-old pilgrimage in Spain and made a really deep connection with a man with no teeth? You've clicked on the right video. Happy whatever day of the week it is to you, and thanks for checking out Be Connected's video of the week. So let's start off with a joke. So, why do ants never get sick? Do you know? No? Okay. Didn't think so. Because they have little antibodies. I liked that one. So this week's story comes to me from a good friend of mine who I met while walking a pilgrimage called the Camino de Santiago. Its roots are very old and its history is vast. I'm not going to go into either right now, but I would say that this was one of the biggest highlights of Karl and I's trip that we took, which is amazing. There's something about it, the simplicity of it, the complexity of it. It is almost like a metaphor for life, I think. In walking it, there was something so empowering, humbling, and life-changing. It just connects you to other people, and really people from all over the world walk it. Because you're doing the exact same thing, you each have that purpose to reach, your destination, but also just to go through what you're going through. It really does take you into the moment every single day. And it's all about your journey, what you're meant to go through. Karl and I both met this woman named Monika, and she is such a hoot. She has been writing a book about her journey on the Camino and what she was going through, at the time. And she's a very open and honest person, and I knew she had a lot of stories, so I just reached out and asked her if she could share a story with me. Her story is called The Pebble, and I fell in love with it. It's about her connecting with a stranger just along the Camino. So this is part of the magic that happens. Everybody who's coming into your life on the Camino is meant to be there for a reason. Whether it's you pass them on the way and make a connection eye to eye for a split second, or if you walk with them for 3 weeks. I feel like we're all each other's teachers. So this is a story that embodies that connection that you can make, however brief it is, that just kind of hit home and, change something in you. I'm reading a personal story that is going to be in her book that hopefully she, is going to be getting published soon. After reading a few of her stories, I have no doubt that she'll be picked up and the book will be published. The name of her book is You'll Cry 3 Times, Stumbling Through My Life on the Camino de Santiago. Thank you, Monika. I appreciate the story. What has brought you the most joy on the Camino, and what has brought you to tears? Whenever this topic came up around dinner or while walking, there were always stories about the moments that left the other pilgrims awash in tears. When the time came for me to share, I would simply shrug. I'd say I'd had plenty of sad moments, grieving moments, frustrated moments, but nothing that had left me in need of a tissue. The couple smiled at each other. How about joy? Oh, I said, so many things. The smell of the Camino in the morning, cafe con leches, snail tracks in the dust, Jesuit priests, getting into bed at night, ice cream. They nodded in agreement and laughed when I told them I had discovered the secret to why albergues were so awful. It was to make getting up at 5 a.m. and walking 18 kilometers in wretched heat something we longed for. We walked together for an hour, but then they drifted off the path to find a deserted castle that held a sacred cross. Have you heard the saying, "You'll cry 3 times"? The husband asked as we said our goodbyes. I laughed. I have, I said, rolling my eyes. I was told that by my crazy innkeeper in St. John. I think I might be the exception. I hope not, said the wife, smiling at me. You wouldn't really be experiencing the Camino if you don't. I indulged her by agreeing, and then waved goodbye, laughing to myself at how sentimental people got with age. The day continued wicked hot. It didn't take long before I was dreaming about lunch, and iced coffee, and some shade under an umbrella. I also got thinking about Denny. I hadn't seen him for days. Avoiding someone on the Camino was way harder than bumping into them. I wondered where he could be. I could tell husband number 2 was lonely. Often, our phone conversations were strained. It was hard over the phone to adequately convey the reality of what walking the Camino was like. Most conversations were about how hot it was, how long I had walked, and what I had eaten. When I tried to describe the hollowed-out ruins or the wind-swept fields, words failed me. Each day, so full of suspense, emotion, revelation, could not be translated, so instead he heard about a daily routine full of dust, grime, bad food, and sore knees. I knew he was wondering why I was here instead of at home with him. Right now, dust, grime, and sore knees felt like a pretty good definition of my everyday. 2 weeks in, nothing felt novel anymore. Taking Spain 3 feet at a time could be deathly boring, and right now I wanted to stop for a coffee and some food. And my knee had started hurting again. Finally, a church steeple came into view. As the village square appeared, it looked no different than the 100 I'd walked through before, except the sign on the only cafe read, "Closed." Limping to a bench in the shade, I sat down and took stock of my options. I knew I had a banana, some nuts, and a bit of water left, and more water was available at the town fountain. It wasn't going to be a lot to get me through another 10K, but I certainly wasn't going to starve. I was, however, very disappointed. Enjoying a midday meal was something I took as my God-given right. I walked, and he, she, it provided me with cafes full of pastries, coffees, and potatoes. It was our unspoken agreement. Glumly, I fished around for my nuts. As I snapped and unsnapped pockets, I saw an old man enter the courtyard. His cane clicked on the well-worn stones. His shoes were shined, and his black suit jacket hinted at a bygone elegance. I found him quite winsome, but I felt compelled to continue cursing the Camino for robbing me out of my cafe con leche. Quite unexpectedly, I felt someone sit down directly next to me. Tipping my sun hat to the side, I saw it was the dapper old man and his cane. "Naranja?" he asked, holding out an orange. I smiled politely and shook my head. "No, gracias." He smiled back. Where I expected to see teeth, I saw worn brown nubs or nothing at all. I recoiled. As much as Flynn had tried to convince me otherwise, I'd never developed a soft spot for toothless people. I thought of moving to another bench, but couldn't think of a way to do it without offending the lovely gentleman who was so generously offering to feed me. Without thinking, I held up my bag of almonds. Nuts? For just an instant, he stared at the bag and then broke out laughing. Pointing at his mouth, he said something in rapid Spanish, too fast for me to understand, but no doubt explaining that eating nuts was something he hadn't done in a decade or more. I smiled at him sheepishly. What had I been thinking? I snapped my fingers and reached down into my side pocket of my pack. "Banana?" I asked him hopefully. See, he said, smiling widely, showing me that indeed he had no capacity to eat anything even resembling a nut. He peeled the banana and then carefully broke it into two and gave me half. We sat in silence eating. When we finished, he took an ancient pocket knife from his suit pocket and began peeling the orange. The sharp tang of citrus spilled into the air. He broke the peeled fruit into two. He handed me a bigger piece, and again we sat in silence eating. When I was done, he pulled out a light blue handkerchief and handed it to me. I wiped my hands and handed it back. He then cleaned his knife with it and put it away. Then he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a photograph, bent, spotted, and worn. The picture was a beautiful young woman, sitting at a table, the delight on their faces still as captivating as ever. The girl was gorgeous, her hair done up in a mass of dark victory curls, the very picture of a stylish young woman of the 40s. The dashing man had his hand on her shoulder, placed it in such a way that it was evident he was crazy about her. He was leaning down just a bit with his cheek resting on one of her curls. Mi esposa, the old man said, pointing at the photo. My wife. Azul, he said, pointing at her eyes. I peered closer. Even in the black and white photo, it was clear that the young girl's eyes were a striking blue. Azul, he said, and pointed at my eyes. Si, I said back to him. Azul. He nodded and pointed back at the photograph. Muerta, he said softly. Lo siento, I said to him in apology. Está bien, he said. We sat for a moment longer. Reaching down to the ground, he picked up a small white pebble. He held it to his cheek and then kissed it. Taking my hand, he put the pebble in my palm, curling my fingers around it. His brown fingers were soft and warm. It is too precious not to cry. His brown fingers were soft and warm. He held my hand to his chest. Mi corazón, he said, my heart. I knew I wasn't going to make it through without crying about this. I was deeply touched, wanting to give him a gift in return. I reached for the pilgrim shell tied to my pack. For you, I said to him in Spanish. He shook his head no. He took my face in his wrinkled hands and looked deeply into my eyes. Azul, he said, happily, his breath the fragrance of bananas and orange. Without thinking, I kissed him on the cheek and then placed my cheek on his. I stayed there for just an instant before pulling back and smiling into his eyes. I knew I was going to bawl like a baby. Well, thanks, Monika. His hands patted his chest once more. Then, as though he just realized he should be somewhere else, he put his photograph back into his pocket and stood up. Vaya con Dios, he said with a smile, and tipped an imaginary hat. I watched him tap his way across the square into the church. Slowly, I packed up, hoisted my pack onto my back, clicked the buckles, then reached for my pebble. Then I sat back down. The tears started almost immediately. Yes, they do. Tears that had been denied and pent up for so long. They flowed down my cheeks in rivulets, and I let them drop onto the pebble and lap unashamedly. He still grieved for the blue eyes of his wife. This is what I thought would be my story: everlasting love, existing beyond death. Simple, sweet, and true. That's what Flynn and I had promised each other. I wanted to follow the old man into the church, to have him hold my hand again. To give me one more taste of a man who stayed loyal, to soak up what would never be mine. The tears lasted for quite a while. Pilgrims walked by, respectfully leaving me with my grief. None approached me, except a ruddy-faced Englishwoman who handed me a wad of tissues with the gentle murmur, "There, there." When I finally started walking again, I held the pebble in my hand. Rubbing it in my palm, taking comfort in its simplicity, it was as unadorned and pure as the love it represented. It was uncompromising in its steadfastness. It was solid as a rock. Aren't you glad I started with a joke? Well, yeah, I hope that that story kind of shows you what love the world has to offer out there and how magical that pilgrimage, the Camino de Santiago, can be. I hope you have a great week, and don't forget to breathe and let yourself cry if you need to, and open your heart. Yeah, I love you guys. All right, bye.
Está cegando Astorga a la tierra